Um, so welcome. I don't know where I got lost, but hello and welcome to week 2 of the Future Flight Friday mini-series. So we're going to be discussing the immediate skills gaps today within the future flight industry. We've got a panel with some lovely guests you might already see and you might know. We'll introduce them a little bit later. But hi, my name's Amy. If you don't know me already, I'm an innovation lead on the Future Flight Challenge. And also online today, we've got Shelley from the KTN. Feel free to drop in the chat if you've got any queries about the webinar today and any functionality issues. So yeah, we're going to get started. I thought I'd start by just reminding everybody that the competition launches on Monday. So the brief has been up for you to view for a little while. The formal competition opens on Monday. So I thought I'd just signpost that again if you didn't know, or it's kind of creeped up a little bit quicker than you thought. But that's why we're here at the end of the day. So today we're going to be discussing a little bit more in depth about where the skills gaps are. Last week I flashed up the little list here of the immediate skills gaps that Future Flight have identified. And I thought I'd just talk about initially how Future Flight came to agree that list of, I think it's 11 or 12. So our phase 2 participants were 48 projects, and throughout those 48 projects we had nearly 300 organizations. So we utilized that community quite a lot to engage with and understand different aspects of the system, one of which was skills. And earlier in the year, back in March, we had an event and we ran a panel and we ran a survey live with them. And we asked them to open-endedly input the skills or capability gaps that they felt the industry was experiencing. We had a rather large input and lots of different perspectives, some of which were more detailed roles as opposed to sort of a top level skill theme, but overwhelmingly we had a really good input. Future Flight then took the outputs from that survey and we sort of workshopped them within the team to kind of group them into larger themes. You know, we're looking at quite a large complex aviation system, and if we are to summarize them, it can be quite hard, and you probably might not agree with the way that some of them have been summarized, or maybe they aren't inclusive enough, but we tried our best to cover off as many of the skills that were put forward to us in sort of top level themes. So once we decided upon these, we then ran another survey through the KTN, and the KTN community is the Future Flight KTN community that they've established will be a mix of all of our phase 2, phase 1, phase 3, and anybody that's registered to be a part of our community. So it's a really broad mix. What I will say is that Future Flight is a sort of 70% less SME-led program. So, you know, from the data itself, we're getting a lot of impressions from those smaller businesses. But before I bring up on screen the data that we got from this, which I'm sure everyone's interested to see, I thought it would be really interested to run a quick poll asking you a really similar question. So we asked our community to agree yes or no with each of these themes. Today we're going to ask you guys to tick 3 ideally. So please select the priority skills areas you think need the most attention. I think Shelley's going to get that up on your screen shortly. You might notice that the groups have been condensed a little bit. Unfortunately, the polling system on Zoom only allows for 10 options. So I've kind of grouped a couple together that I think makes sense. So fire away with your ticking, and you ideally, I mean, you can select, I think you can formally select as many as you like, but select 3 and it'll just help us get an impression of what you think are the top skills gaps. I can see it all moving around. That's so interesting. I'll just give you guys a minute or two. I can see some more people have joined in the last few minutes. So for those of you who joined, you might see a poll on your screen. We're just asking you to select which of these top themed skills areas you think are a priority for the industry right now. Okay, it looks like it's slowed down. So shall we? Oh, that's a few more ticking as I said that. Okay, brilliant. Right, well, we'll end the poll there. So let's have a little look. I'm really interested. What I'm going to do, if I can leave that on screen and tick to the next slide. Can I do that? Yes, I can. Fabulous. Hopefully you can all see the results yourself as well. And on screen, I've shared the results from our survey that we did through the KTN. So I just want to see how they're comparing. So I think it's fair to say that the top immediate skills gap has been the same result that we got earlier in the year from the KTN. That's really interesting. Regulation following up closely behind. We have digital and cybersecurity. We've obviously got some people online, maybe in those areas. That's moved up a little higher than we got in our survey with KTN. And battery and hydrogen fuel moving down a little bit. I must admit that one did surprise me when we got the data back, how high battery and hydrogen fuel was sitting. And policy sitting 11%. So that's actually quite different. And that's really, really amazing. And I think this is, it's almost brilliant to see that there's some differences in opinion here. We don't claim to know the answers. We don't claim to dictate these are the skills that you need to be addressing. We do, within the brief for our funding call, list these skills, but that's more of a direction. We aren't expecting you to have to pick one of these out. We are interested to hear of any other skills that maybe haven't yet been identified or aren't included in these themes that we've outlined. So really, really interesting. I'll probably just pop to the next screen. Hopefully that little bit of data delving on screen for you to look at has helped create some questions for you and maybe some disagreements or some agreements with some of the data. So without further ado, I'll let them introduce themselves. We've got 3 panelists today to talk a little bit about the immediate skills gaps. And I'll start with, as per the screen, Sunil. Would you mind introducing yourself?
Helps if I unmute myself. Hi everyone, my name is Sunil Badeo. I'm the Transport Innovation Manager for Coventry City Council. Been involved in the Future Flight 1 and 2 programs. Yeah, first authority to deploy the urban airport and the development of that. Thank you, Amy.
Fab. I'll pass over to Andrew.
Yes, hello, thanks Amy. Hello everyone, my name is Andrew Chadwick. I'm with Connected Places Catapult. I'm our Aviation Technology Innovation Lead. I guess the reason I'm here today representing Catapult is we're just performing a piece of work for the Department for Transport, which is looking at future aviation skills. We've been doing a lot of work within the Catapult looking at zero emission flight infrastructure, so the introduction of hydrogen electric powered aircraft. Future Flight Challenge, we're involved in a wide variety of programs, and also with drones with the Pathfinder Catalyst program. And we'd identified a shortage of necessary skills right across the patch. So we're working on behalf of the Department for Transport to put together an action plan for the development of medium and long-term aviation skills, with some potential short-term actions as well that can be adopted to address some of those immediate challenges that we have. So that's why I'm here, but it's good to see you.
Thanks, Andrew. And Graham, would you mind introducing yourself?
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. Graham Brown. I'm from RPAS, which is the UK Trade Association for all things drone. One of our particular focuses is on education and on skills development. And I think it's worth noting that we engage quite a lot with some of the GA community and attend some of the same panels with DFT and what have you as airlines and airports. And everybody in the last sort of 6 months has been worried about the skills gap, the getting competent people on board, and you know, how do we make sure that we have enough skills going forwards? And that's everybody from listening to Virgin 2 days ago to looking at the number of adverts and the struggle people are having to fill current vacancies.
Thanks, Graham. So welcome to our panelists and welcome to those online. Feel free to drop additional questions in the Q&A. I've obviously got some questions lined up, but I have seen the one that's come in, and I'll answer that one in time. I'll probably one for me more than our panelists. So let me just get the right screen up because my questions are on a different page. So who shall we kick off with? Let's go with Graham. You were the last introducer. We'll start with you. Overall, and that was what I was going to do. Apologies. I'm just going to move the data back on the screen. So overall, do you think the data that the Future Flight and the KTN have generated reflects the real-time resource shortages being experienced by the industry? Oh, you're on mute.
Apologies, someone has to do that every meeting. I do. I mean, I think that there may be a few questionable pieces. Amy, you know, we talked about some of the battery technology, hydrogen fuel pieces. They're an issue, but they're not necessarily a skills shortage as we see it at the minute. But I think the safety, certification, regulation, and in particular training, and one that I think you know, is low down here, local planning. It's again not a skills gap, but it's a potential issue going forwards. Engagement with local authorities, and I can see Sunil nodding there. He's probably got more commentary on that as well. One of the key problems we have, though, is how do we attract people into the industry so that, you know, we can get this training going. And the last point I'd make is the bit that's not on here as much, but comes out slightly more strongly in some of the work that we've done, is drones are the only aviation element that are used where the main purpose sometimes is not transportation and aviation. It's data collection, it's inspection, and that training and how we engage in industry is a vital sort of piece that we need to fix going forwards. Thank you.
Oh, yeah, that's really interesting. Did Andrew and Sunil want to add anything to that question in particular? I think Sunil, you were nodding away.
Now, Graham's identified that gap, bearing in mind local authorities up until now have never been involved in flights in the urban environment. Our remit has always been to deal with traffic on roads, rails, and below a sort of ground level, you know, and never in skies. So the skills shortage there is a huge gap, and to understand what is required for urban mobility, air mobility to operate in an urban environment.
Mm-hmm.
So planning is one of them. So, and you know, we'll probably go into it a little bit more as we go along through this presentation. But there's skills shortage, but it also is going to encourage the upcoming shortage in skills and in employment, where there is a market for people to get trained up onto this new mode of transport.
Absolutely. And obviously you've both highlighted that another gap there, Graham. I mean, Andrew, do you think there are any other key themes missing from this list that we've had generated?
I suspect there are, but I was going to go back to some of the other points really before I answered that. So things like safety and certification and regulation. And the question I have about that is whether there are actually skill gaps or whether there's just a lack of safety and certification and regulation. And it's whether that's the question which is being answered. I mean, I could name at least 40 consultancies in the UK that provide safety and certification support, and they have a lot of capabilities throughout there. So it's whether it's the lack of people or is it just a lack of understanding of those safety and certification regulations. From the work that we're doing and what we've observed on some of our programs, a lot of the skills center around things such as the electrical side of things, so battery technology, the introduction of new fuels, and also with around data management as well, which Sunil mentioned. Before I came online, I had a look on the website of a leading UK aerospace company, aviation company, who have over 50 vacancies at the moment. The vacancies, I'm not going to name the company, are around things like energy storage systems, so batteries, powertrains, flight physics, digital systems, and around test and valuation. There was no request or need for safety and regulation. They have those people. Whereas those other technical skills, and I know other companies that have similar things, where those skills are not available either in the UK, or they're definitely not available in aerospace and aviation. And it's how do we actually attract those people? And also in the shorter term, but also in the longer term, how do we actually develop those skills within the UK? Because currently we're not set up to do that. And as Graham quite rightly said, the more younger members of our society today are not attracted to aviation. So there's some work still to be done on there. But as to there being gaps, I think perhaps a bit more on the data management side of things. I mean, digital and cybersecurity, absolutely. But we've been finding from the work we've done recently, which is engaging with a wide variety of stakeholders right across the industry, including those education establishments that do support the industry, that data management is something which is not on this list and is something which is needed, desperately needed.
No, that's really useful, Andrew, and I have made a note of that for future when we're workshopping this further. Your comments around the fact that we're trying to create an attractive industry, I think that's really interesting. Obviously, the conversations we're having with our SMEs is that they can't make these roles attractive enough for the next generation. And it is quite a hurdle we're coming across. And on top of that, we've got aviation with a bit of a bad rep at the moment for the new generation that are coming through, who are much more energy and environmentally conscious. So
yes,
we definitely have a bit of an image problem, which is almost a separate sort of activity within itself, rebranding the aviation industry.
Yeah, I don't think it's a case of rebranding it. I mean, they are more. I mean, the young, and quite rightly so, are more climate conscious, and and are more likely to avoid industries they see as polluting. And so I think it's not really necessarily rebranding aviation. I think it's a case of actually doing a good PR job on aviation, which is something which has been missing for goodness knows how many years. Mm-hmm. Because it is, I mean, and a lot of people maybe online who work in the industry, it is a really attractive industry. When you're in it, it is one of the most exciting and innovative industries you can work in. But it's getting that message across, and it's a tricky sell at the moment.
Yeah, I can agree with that. Graham, we've had a follow-up question. So something that you mentioned, you explained that there's a lot of shortages in people applying for positions, and somebody's followed up and said, can you comment on whether the people that do apply have the right and adequate skills, or if they need sort of further training?
I think that is a great question, and the answer is it's hard for companies to establish. Because when I talk to folk in industry, people turn up, for instance, applying for a pilot's job. They've got a GVC, but there is no way of telling whether they have the right skills and the flying skills and the industry knowledge to fly in that role that they're applying for. And that's something we've been working over time with one of the industry training boards, and that's got industry reps in there looking at, how do we train and how do we certify for people so that employers know what they're getting. And it's not unique to the drone activities, but it is more, the other industries are more established and have set procedures. So that skills piece, and some people will be pleased to hear, the conclusion is you need a pretty fundamental, practical element to that skills assessment piece. You can't just, do the theory and then say, yeah, I'm one of those. And, I use the example of, it's like people doing the driving, the the theoretical driving test and then being thrown the keys to a van and being asked to deliver parcels when they may never have driven before. You know, it's a bit of a conundrum really for employers.
No, absolutely. Thanks, Graham. I'm going to move on to another question, and Sunil, this might be a bit of a one that I already know the answer to, but if you were to pick a skill or a theme here on the screen that you think is a big blocker for the industry right now, what would it be and why?
The biggest blocker at the moment is the challenges that we have in understanding this new mode of transport. Local authorities, as I said previously, aren't aware of what the benefits of this mode of transport would be. So we mentioned local planning. What, you know, the skill shortage there is huge, in the sense that, you know, what is it that we require? What is it that we need to understand as planners, local authority planners, to try and implement these emerging technology and emerging mode of transport? Previously, we've never associated or engaged with the local civil aviation authority or designers of drones and what the capabilities are. So that huge gap in planning and pilot training, what is it that is a pilot can deliver for the local authority? You know, how do we understand air traffic management? So the list that is displayed at the moment, the percentages may vary. Safety and certification is also a key, because we do not want to operate anything which is not safe or not tested in an urban environment, which could have an adverse effect of something that hasn't been tested. You know, the air traffic management, we're happy managing roads, but how do we manage air? And so the understanding of that and engaging with people who are in the know. At the moment, as I say, some authorities are actively engaged, like Coventry, and some are joining now. Other authorities need to be brought on board, and that skill set needs to be transferred over at that level. But I see getting that training out as soon as possible for it to be ready and implemented, because we're not far away, and this is coming, and we need to be ready for it.
I totally agree, and for me, when this came through, and even the poll today, like local planning is one that Future Flight is very aware could be a big blocker for the UK to implement these sort of drone services that are coming to life, and the use cases that are coming to life. We really need to upskill our local communities and empower them to get involved. At the moment, it feels very sort of far off in the future for a lot of local authorities, or, oh, isn't that very sort of dystopian or something from a sci-fi movie? But ultimately it is here, and it's been so incredible to watch your council, Sunil, you know, deploy the world's first vertiport at the end of the day, like pop-up vertiport, and have a drone demonstration in the centre of Coventry, right next to the train station. And if we could get more local councils sort of just aware that this is here, and they can try and figure out if it's a solution for them, and it might not be a solution for every council, but it could certainly sort of help, and it could be a big blocker for the industry if we don't get them involved.
It is, Amy, and as I say, you know, it's going to benefit all local authorities, come what may, purely because it will help us meet some of the targets that have been set by the government in reducing and meeting our net zero targets. There again, regulation is another thing which I missed to mention earlier. Is a key, because aviation industry's regulations up until now were concentrated on commercial flights. We now need to change those regulations for air mobility, urban air mobility, because they're slightly different. You know, so we need to work collaboratively and upskill those people who are making those regulations and planning, combining to try and get this operational.
Thanks, Sunil. I'll forward that question to one more. Andrew, I was curious if you had a difference in opinion, or if you could pick just one from this theme list, which do you think is the biggest blocker for the skills sort of industry at the moment?
Well, I think the biggest blocker is getting people, to be perfectly honest, right across the patch. And so it's neither one nor the other. I mean, there are huge gaps right across the board, and it's and on the technology side, it's that yes, there are skills in other sectors, but trying to attract those sort of people into aviation is very tricky. I mean, I know of companies at the moment who are trying to engage with people that actually manufacture MRI systems, so they can try and get hold of their hydrogen knowledge and electrical knowledge, so they can actually bring them into aviation in some way. So that it's you know, we don't have that at the moment. We don't have that that sort of train of thought where we're trying to get people into the aviation industry and doing that education piece. And I think things like on the local planning and regulation, some of that is more about training and knowledge share as opposed to skill gaps as such, I think. But I think of all of those, if we're going to say, if I was going to be asked where would I put my money, it's in the fuels, it's in the new fuels, because that's going to hit us, you know, now. I mean, it's starting now, and you know, hydrogen is going to be the future, and we have very little capability in this country.
That actually leads me on nicely to my next question, as whether or not you feel any of these skill areas are going to be filled organically through other sectors. You know, especially with the fuel ones, is what I was thinking. We aren't the only industry looking to these fuels to see how they're going to result, or if they're going to be as positive an impact as we hope. So do you think not just fuels, but any of these could be sort of cross-industry skills that maybe not just aviation need to source?
I do, absolutely, but it's attracting the people to the industry itself. If you're skilled in autonomy or hydrogen or in cybersecurity, and you're being offered significantly higher salaries to work in other industries, you're going to hold out and work in those industries. You're not going to be attracted to aviation, and it could be purely down to finance. For those people, and I know there's initiatives which are taking place where we're trying to educate. Actually, so some of it is upskilling current people who are working in the industry, who are interested in working in things like hydrogen and the like, of being introduced to aviation itself, so they actually understand that a little bit more, and courses which do more about introducing some of the technologies into aviation. So it's at the moment it's attracting those people. That's and that's not just in aviation, that's right across the board. There are no people, and that's the thing.
Do you think that that's a fault of the industry just not embedding itself well enough in the sort of training that already exists, or the academic that already exists? Like this, we're obviously in an emerging new form of aviation, and there's a sort of lack of awareness. Do you think that if there were modules and courses created at that point where people are deciding their careers, that they could be tempted to move into aviation? Or do you think they exist and we're still not attracting them?
I think it has to be more attractive. That it has to be easy for people to join the industry. I did an exercise a few months ago where I just went online and put careers in aviation, and the first few pages on the search came up with, oh, you need to have physics, oh, you need to have maths, you need to be an expert in this, that, and the other, and so straight away there's a barrier. There's no easy way to get into engineering. You've got to be some great genius. So I did the same thing of careers in marketing, and I know it's slightly different, but the barriers to entry into marketing is so much easier, and they're so much welcoming, and I sort of learned something from that, because it's, you know, we try and make it really difficult because we're so good and we're so clever. It makes it really difficult. People think, oh, I can't do that, I'm going to do something else, and it's having that barrier of entry being so much lower. And that's not saying we don't have high intelligent people. We try and dumb it down. It's just to make it easier for those people who want to join the industry to join it, and for them to understand that they don't have to necessarily come with those skills. They will actually be taught within the industry. And a lot of companies are just buying in skills now, and they're not looking at how they develop, how they're more resilient, and how they can actually develop in the coming years. They're just buying in so they can hit their short-term targets. And it's that wider piece of thinking about what does the skills landscape look like in the UK in aviation, what is going to be required, and how do we achieve that? And we don't just try and get a quick results in the next couple of years, because this is something which, you know, it won't go away, and in fact, if anything, will just be worse.
No, absolutely. It sounds like there's a sort of we need to be attracting more talent, maybe outside the traditional engineering routes, and we need to maybe there needs to be some sort of initiative or course generation available to those people to empower themselves to hop into our industry, because you're right, there's that kind of stigma of, well, if you're not an engineer, if you haven't done this since, you know, university or your schooling, then you can't get into it now. So perhaps some sort of transitional sort of course or an entry level pieces that will just empower people to go, I'll apply for that job, because they've got the transferable skills. But then we also need to empower the industry to hire outside of their traditional, you're an aerospace engineer, that's who we need.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and it's also looking at more diverse and inclusive talent that's out there. We've not done that historically as a sector, and it's really looking, you know, if you're going to apply to work in the industry, you want to be able to be assured that you're going to be going into an industry that, you know, there's like-minded people in there, and you know, people that look the same as us, and it's not like that at the moment. So it's how can you attract more diverse and be more inclusive across society as well. But as you quite rightly said, Amy, it's also so those people who are in mid-career or partway through the career who decide they want to try in aviation, how can you actually make that transition a lot easier, and you know, what courses and just that you know, how you get through that barrier. It's you know, I think that would help us a lot.
It would be really good to see some businesses maybe generating their own kind of join us and here's an entry course in order to do this role or something like that. So there's this kind of joint trust from each side that, okay, they're going to give me some training so I don't feel completely out of my depth. And also we're going to give them some training so we know that they can get started straight away. So it'd be nice to see something like that.
Yeah.
Graham, I'll move on to another question. I've got a few.
Well, can I just make a couple of comments, because I think there were some really good points there. The first one being that, you know, this is a long-term strategy, and I'm sure, you know, when automotive industry started, it had similar problems. And we've just got to learn that, you know, you can't, as Andrew said, apply a quick fix and hope it all goes away. The second point I'd say is, you know, drones are really quite exciting, so there is no excuse for us not to be able to attract people. And as you know, I bang on about the fact that we need to start young. We need to have things that explain all the way starting in school and going through, you know, up to sort of the age of 25 when people are moving into careers after, you know, education. We've got to hit all of those with an understanding of the potential and the excitement in this industry. And I think the other thing I always revert back to, there's a lady called Mandy Hickson, who's one of the aviation ambassadors for the DFT, and she was the second ever Tornado pilot. And it's not that bit. She gives a great talk about all of her experiences in war zones and what have you. But what she also says is, as a pilot, we get all the kudos, but there are over 60 other trades needed to keep me in the air, she says. Wow, yeah. And, you know, so we're not just talking about pilots and what have you. We're talking about a whole industry which covers a gamut of things, and we've got to make that attractive, even if, you know, it means early morning starts and what have you. We've just got to keep going, and we've got to start young.
Absolutely.
So anyway, sorry, that was my sort of conclusion to what Andrew was saying. And what was your question?
No worries. I think you've mimicked some of the thoughts from people listening. I can see Alan said, could the industry do more to inspire younger people, particularly those at school? I guess, yeah, we do need to look to the industry. They're the ones kind of shaping the future right now. And
please, if anybody's got any comments on that, you know, get hold of me, because we are actively looking at what we can do with STEM and STEM-like education, you know, right now, and that'll cover, you know, from school all the way through university. So yeah, I mean, open for comments, ideas, and thoughts on that, and volunteers.
Absolutely, but I'll go back to the question I was originally going to ask, which ties in with a comment from Joanna here, explaining that we've got big players in hydrogen that are also big players in aviation. There's a nice bit of sort of cross-sector knowledge happening there. And one of the questions I've got is, are there any of the skills here that could be addressed together? Are there any sort of jointly tackled courses you think that could be designed? Because at the end of the day, we need people with that more systems view. We're trying to incorporate so many different parts of you know, different specialities that maybe haven't worked together. If you could pull a couple together, where would you see that happening, Graham?
Oh, you mean of these topics here on the list?
Yeah, or outside of these. Just,
well,
there's
I
some
mean,
that naturally sandwich, so it's just your thoughts on whether or not that's possible.
What I would say first of all is, you know, having a priority list is great, and you know, sometimes you need that when resources, as you've got to prioritize them, but the reality is we've got to address all of these, because if we don't have pilot training and competent pilots, then the rest of the, you know, the building blocks fall apart anyway. So I do think we need to look at this from the point of view, and I think both Sunil and Andrew touched on it. We've got to look at this from the point of the employers and see what they think the natural groupings are for the people that they're trying to employ. Clearly, and clearly some of these are on a different timeline to others. I mean, autonomy is very interesting, but it you know, we need to start training for that in universities and what have you, but it's not a today deliverable. I haven't seen many people advertising for, you know, autonomous. It's happening in various projects, but it's not a today operational, how do we move the industry forwards? Whereas regulation, safety, certification, you know, and battery technology is holding us back. I'm not sure battery technology is an education piece as much as a, you know, R&D piece, but you know, I guess that's open for interpretation as well.
No,
I don't have a good answer to say, oh, flight management, pilot training, and what have you. I hadn't thought of it from that perspective in that detail. Amy, sorry.
Did you want to add to that, Sunil?
Yeah, I was just going to say it's a very valid question. That are we able to sort of upskill someone in just not just the sort of urban air mobility or air? Can we now look at using some of the skill sets? We're talking about fuel, so the fuels are electric, hydrogen for autonomous vehicles as well on ground. Can we tie the two together? The technology about safety and certification regulations. When you look down the list, digital and cyber security, they cross over. Communication is something that's not mentioned here, but communication is another subject that can actually upskill someone to understand what is required as an infrastructure change, right, for both modes of transport to operate. Because as this is the local authority perspective, what we don't have the funding to keep increasing our communications modes around. So, you know, not one for air mobility and another one for sort of autonomous vehicles.
Mm-hmm.
And we merge communication as a subject where, you know, and those taking this back to perhaps the school curriculums, mm-hmm. to try and get them to understand pilot training. Because what we're saying is it's not under the sort of undermining or making the skill set at a lower level, but the youth of today and the generation today are more agile in operating and understanding how the sort of technology works than the older generation.
Absolutely. And that question's come up, Alex, in the questions, has actually asked, and I don't know how much insight you all have into the existing curriculum as it stands, but do we know if schools are talking about alternative energy propulsion as the example that Alex has used? Do we know if they're actually talking about this at a younger age and exposing them to these, or is it still a traditional curriculum in a sense? And I don't know if anyone on the panel here has got a comment on that.
I haven't. We've been asking around schools and what have you. I haven't come across anybody who is adding this. You know that one of the issues or the barriers I would add in there is that the Department for Education isn't really interested in talking, in my experience, about how do we make any changes, and trying to get something onto the curriculum that's new is extremely hard.
Yeah.
And then trying to get it funded once it's on the curriculum is sort of even harder. But you know, I don't think that means we should give up. We just got to keep pressing along at that, engaging the kids and giving them a way of learning without having to train all the trainers, because that's the other barrier. if we had some of this content, just the sheer task of trying to train and educate the people who are going to teach it is a problem. So we need to revert to e-learning and what have you to get the initial interest, in my view.
Absolutely. Where shall we go to next? I saw there's quite a few questions popping in now, and I don't know, some people have mentioned some of the courses that they're already running, which is really brilliant in STEM. I have got a question here from Ryan. How are skills projects funded? Well, within, I'm not sure what your exact question was directed towards. Within this program, we're funding skills projects in a sense of designing new course material, new initiatives, new ways of teaching people about potentially one of these topics. It is 100% funded, and you've got like 3 to 6 months to deliver, so you can read more about that on the website. And then you followed the question with, how optimistic are you about the future funding landscape? And obviously, as Innovate UK, we don't have a strict plan at the moment following Future Flight as it stands. However, we are at a point right now where we're starting to understand what's next, and it's really crucial that we see outputs from this competition to understand what the appetite is, what the industry want to address, who's available to address these kinds of things. We don't see this competition as answering the skills issues or the skills hurdles or even filling the gaps in essence, but we are stimulating conversation, stimulating those collaborations between training organizations, academia and industry, and it will definitely educate us on what to propose for future funding rounds, and really understand we are the third competition of this kind, really breaking the mold. Skills hasn't been funded in this way before, and we're really proud, Future Flight, that we are doing this. So we are still learning on how to get money out there to fund these kinds of things. So we're always looking for insight on ways to improve that, and we'll hopefully learn a lot from this competition.
Amy, there's a couple of, sorry, I was going to say there's a couple of questions. One's from Ben Lennon-Wood about the panel envisaging sufficient investment in training. We don't think there is, Ben, just in answer to your question there. But I agree with you 100%. Training is the key to try and get people engaged, because at the moment it's an unknown art to a lot of, as we Graham's alluded to that, you know, no matter how many schools, colleges we go to, there's only a number who are interested in this Future Flight development. So yes, training is key, but we need to start at probably grassroots levels to bring it up to skills. And the other one is from Alistair for the first supplying over 50 first-year apprentices to local aerospace hubs this year. But my suggestion, Alistair, there would be, it's great, but that's constrained to the aerospace industry. What we're trying to do, the program that we're involved in this with the Future Flights is urban. We need to bring it back, and it's a transport mode. So I've always tried to pitch it, and Graham and Andrew will probably agree with me to say, you know, this is now a transport mode that we're now trying to introduce within an urban environment. Up until now, what the aerospace industry has been about commercial airlines, future flights, sort of, you know, commercial flights. Here we are talking at another mode of transport locally. So it'll be good to see if we can get these apprenticeships back into local authorities to try and develop those skill sets, so we can retain the local authority perspective of it.
I do think that's a really insightful comment though from Alistair around how colleges seem to be able to react quicker than universities, and I think that speaks to the fact that universities and some schools are quite trapped by the systems that they're in, and maybe colleges have got a little bit more freedom. But that's a really it's something that I wouldn't know, so that's really something useful to share. We've had a few questions around the groups, which I thought would actually come up, the sort of themes. We've had someone ask the very first one, and I didn't mean to pan over it, which was why was capabilities of writing complex operational safety cases not included in the first poll? That's quite a specific skill, I guess, and we are very aware of that as a skill requirement. I was at the Stennistere event just the other week. This data here that we've got was generated a couple of months ago, and I wanted to see the changes between the exact data. So excuse me if I didn't include any or expand these out. We do feel as though it fits within these themes, but you'll probably right, seeing as safety and certification is falling to the top on this poll today and previously. Perhaps we do need to be pulling out the themes within safety and what that actually means to understand and target it a bit better. So I didn't mean to go over that earlier. We've obviously got a few other new ones that maybe aren't covered. May need to add logistics to the list of skills or understanding. A vertiport would need hydrogen or battery supplied, etc. What are the implications for the road, etc., etc. And I agree, we've got infrastructure on our list here, and I've put in brackets vertiports, and we've tried to capture that within the infrastructure realm. But you're right, that it's very cross-sector knowledge. It's a lot of knowledge sharing between hydrogen and the infrastructure and local authorities and planning. And arguably logistics within itself should be a category. I'm not disagreeing with that at all. I think we had communications has come up, which I think one of the panelists mentions as well. So that's really brilliant that that's come up. We aren't, at the end of the day, we aren't claiming that these are the comprehensive list. We've just tried our best to summarize and give some direction for the competition. We've obviously got some work coming out with Andrew Chadwick's skills gap analysis later next year with the CPC, and Future Flight hope to expand on what these mean a bit more in the future. Is there anything else that we haven't covered on the chat? Sorry, I'm manning it all. Had some more.
I was just going to say, Amy, so the study we're doing for the Department for Transport, the plan is that we're actually going to release the report in January. So, and we'll be doing a few things, possibly a webinar or something to share some of those findings. So, yeah, so as we always do with the CASPort, we always share what those findings are, and hopefully we can share the action plan that we're proposing to the Department for Transport. What I would say though, and the Department of Transport's defense is, it's not just across aviation. They are actually doing similar things right across the board on transport, because they are recognizing there is a lack of skills and a lack of people wanting to join the industry. So it is, I think it's finally being recognized in government as being a concern. Can I just pick up on there was the point about the local colleges and the apprentices. I think that's a really good thing, actually. We're aware of a number of companies. One is an airport operator and owner who are actually working with their local colleges and sharing with them the CVs of the type of people they are looking for. So the intention being that any college courses that are being developed are geared towards, and it's being funded by the company as well. They're having parts of the syllabus geared towards the CVs of the type of people that would be employed when they finish going to college. So, and I think that's a good way of looking at it, actually. So it's not just what's coming out of the pipeline, it's actually what are the employers looking for? And I think if there's a lot more of that engagement, I think that would be key for us in the short and the longer term. And I think for attracting more younger people into the industry, it's not necessarily about the specifics we have here and the level of detail. I think it's aviation as an industry and how we promote that, and having champions within the industry that actually go out to schools, are seen on TV, across social media, and are people that you can recognize. I mean, if we were to ask a poll, and I'm not going to ask for any names or anything, to say, could you name 3 people in aviation in the UK who are leading lights in aviation? Now, we on the call may know a few people and we might say it, but if you were to do that as a question to the general public, I don't think you'll get many responses, and that's a sad reflection of the industry of where we are, because a few years ago you could have done something similar, but and had responses. So I think we need to do a little bit more on the PR side of things as well, and that will attract some of those really bright young things that we need.
Well, thanks, Andrew. We'll probably wrap up there. I've got just a couple of points to make before we sign off today. I will just give each of you just one opportunity if there's anything you haven't added. Andrew, you've just wrapped up. Is there anything you want to add to sign off today for anybody who's looking to apply for this round of funding?
For this round of funding, I think it's an excellent opportunity. I'm really pleased that the Future Flight Challenge are putting funding across this, because I think it's the first time it's been done, and so to be able to do that, and for SMEs in particular to help them in maybe putting forward or developing some of the courses and some of the upskilling challenges that we have, I think it's commendable. So if anyone's out there who's looking to bid for some of this funding, I mean, please go for it, because I think I've not seen it before, so it's a great opportunity for everyone.
Well, thank you. Graham, have you got anything to add today? Or you're on mute, Graham.
Yeah, I said lots. I was trying to find a place just to put a note with my contact info. I mean, I'd like to hear from anybody. I looked at some of the chat and the questions, but if anybody's doing anything with education and STEM, you know, please get hold of me, you know, we can follow up. I'm particularly sort of, it's about starting with an education program, which is about understanding and then getting into the specific skills. So we're starting with the that sort of communication piece is what we're investigating right now. On the specific skills, as Andrew said, you know, you've got to engage with the industries and what have you. We work with both the DFT, with some of the and they've got portals on trying to for recruitment and skills development. It's in GA, but we're working with those organizations and some of the other associations to try to pull all of this together, which is where it will be. You know, it's just when, is that 10 years, 20 years or whatever, but the skills need to be transferable and across multiple industries. Then, you know, specifically we're working, as I said, with the industry training boards. And the good thing about those is they levy industry and then they provide grants for training. So we've got some activity going on there, trying to sort of intercept their needs and requirements. As Andrew and Sunil have mentioned, we've got to take the requirements from the hirers and try to plug their gaps, because they're the ones with open jobs or future jobs.
Yeah, I agree. And that's hopefully what we're creating with this competition, is that sort of opportunity to collaborate, because there's money to go, there's money to grab, and industry can work with the people that design these courses and bridge a little bit of a gap. So Neil, do you want to add any final comments before?
Just last thing, I've just put my contact info in the chat if anybody's interested, but thanks.
And just following up, I mean, thanks for that. Again, it's a great opportunity to get that funding, and if anyone is, like everyone else has said, I'd encourage definitely to apply for this funding. And if they're looking for a local authority partner, I'm just.
Oh, you've gone on to mute at the same time. I think you pressed the space bar and it muted you.
I hopefully it won't. I've just put my contact details on there. But if anyone is looking at a partner, local authority partner, Coventry's up for it, and you know, with a limited number of limited knowledge that we've gained through the projects that we're currently working with and have worked with, I think it'd be useful to try and understand and support anyone else who is looking to bid for this funding.
Thank you, Sunil. I'll just quickly answer a question we've got in the box. Do you accept individual applications from academia like a department or university? Yes, we do. We are accepting collaborative and individual applications, and academia can apply, I believe, by themselves as well. But just check the brief on that one. But I believe I put that through because we wanted absolutely anybody to be able to apply for this. So that leads me on quite nicely, actually, just to wrap up. And thank you, our panelists today, for all of your wonderful opinions. It's been really invaluable, and hopefully some people on the online have learned a few things. So where are we right now? Thanks for joining today. This was us talking about some of the data that Futurefly generated, talking a little bit about some of the immediate skills gaps and where we should focus our energy. And next week we have another panel. We've had a really good uptake, so we're going to make next week's another panel. We're going to have some more technical experts within each of those themes present for you to sort of probe for some questions and ask them about some of the sort of real-time resourcing issues that they're experiencing within their sector. So hopefully going to have someone present from sort of the hydrogen domain, regulation, ATM, and cyber insecurity. But yeah, so watch that space and join next week if you want to ask any specific questions on some of those themes. And finally, before we sign off today, the week 4 webinar, the 2nd of December, is an opportunity to pitch for collaborators. So if you are somebody online right now and you might have an idea, but perhaps you need an industry partner to deploy the course with, or feed you extra technical knowledge, or feed you the sort of career, sort of what they're looking for knowledge, or vice versa. Maybe you're somebody in industry and you're looking for a training institute or a charity to pull together your thoughts and create that course material. We want to hear from you. We're allowing you an opportunity to just pitch yourself what you can offer whilst you're looking for a partner. And you can be a silent partner in some of these as well. This is obviously a smaller amount of money than some of the types of funding we see. And in the previous skills competitions run by DER, they had some silent partners. So it would be the training institute that adopted the funding and took on the bid, but they had a silent partner to deploy their training into. So, if you're looking to find somebody else to collaborate with, you can use this platform on week 4 on the 2nd of December. And if you would like to, please email Shelley. Her email is on the screen right now. I will leave it up there for the next minute. Please drop her an email. Please give her a brief bio to yourself and what it is you're looking for, and we'll make sure we'll find you the time to pitch in that session. So that's now opening today. We will probably broadcast this via an email as well, following up to anybody who's registered. So if you don't capture that today, if you're registered, you'll probably get an email on that. So if there's no final questions, I'll just check the chat. There's no final questions. Obviously lots to come out of today, and some of them weren't answered, but please bring your questions to next week, where we'll be delving in with some more focused skills areas. But thank you very much, everybody. That is week 2. Hopefully see you all next week and week after. Yeah, thanks very much. Till next time.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Have a good afternoon.